we still get the same, question, which is, if I have an increment of $10 million of cash flow, do I put it into bonds? Do I put it into gold? Do I buy silver? Do I buy land? Do I buy art? Do I buy Bitcoin? So I still think Bitcoin is the most scarce, most desirable, highest quality property. It's a long-term store of value.
Hello guys, and welcome to another video of Crypto Money Talk.
I think that the highlight in the past year is the institutional adoption of Bitcoin and the maturation of the asset class, along with the education of millions and millions of people as to why they might want digital property, what is a digital commodity, and what's its place in the macro economy. Now, to be clear, I still think we're very early. But, that phrase, there are decades when nothing happens and, weeks when decades happen. It really refers to paradigm shifts. And, if you think about the paradigm shift when automobiles arrived, there's the famous snapshot in New York City where, there's just a bunch of horse and buggies. And 10 years later, it's all cars. And in that 10 years, you adopted it. I remember, standing once on the Pantheon and, or on the Acropolis, and I'm like taking a photo and about to post it. And I think to myself, what's different about this? And I think, well, last time I was here, maybe a decade ago, I had no smartphone. I had no iPhone. There was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. You couldn't post it. Digital photography didn't exist. So a decade goes by and you're like, you're trying to remember, I went to college. We didn't have laptops, Yeah. I thought, well, what if I'd had a spreadsheet when I was doing engineering? I went with an HP 15C calculator, and we had notebooks, and we wrote down 20 pages of calculations in a notebook with the calculator, and I remember seeing people saying, well, you got a calculator? We use slide rules. And you fast forward a decade and people have laptops. You fast forward another decade, they have internet. You fast forward another decade, they've got YouTube and simulations. And now you're starting to question whether or not you even needed to go to college at all. Maybe you could have just sat at home. So every decade, there's some profound paradigm shift. And so, it took a while before people thought maybe radio waves have a place, right? Or maybe electricity has a place in the world, and why would I want a railroad? And why would I want to move a block of $1 billion of something from point A to point B through cyberspace in a split second with instant final settlement, right? Initially, if you roll the clock back a decade, we didn't have it. Every financial crisis we've had, right, in the history of the world, and we've had 10,000 of them. There have been 10,000 currency collapses, and the history is full of examples of an empire rises, someone mints a currency, the successors or the children of the conqueror debase the currency, the grandchildren debase it more, the great-grandchildren forget how they actually got the power, they spend everything, go wacky crazy. Pretty soon the economy collapses, you can't pay your soldiers, they all defect, and the barbarians come over the gate and they take everything, including your debased gold, they melt it down, they purify it, they mint their own coin, and the cycle starts again. That's literally taken place 10,000 times. When von Schliemann dug up ancient Troy, he dug up like 19 ancient Troys. He found 19 cities buried under each city. Everybody said, good place to build a city. They would build it. They would rise over a couple hundred years. They would crash and burn. 200 years would go by. Someone else comes along and says, wow, good place to build a city. We do it again. We do it again. We do it again. That's the history of money. And that's the history of economics. Along comes Satoshi, and we've got the white paper, and January 3rd, 2009, we launched this little monetary virus or this idea virus, and it kind of burns very, very low level for a while, and people aren't sure of it. It's a gimmicky thing, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're waiting for Well, why would you need it? And, you had to be a visionary to kind of need it or get it. If you lived in Argentina and your currency collapsed, and you remember the currency collapsing, or if you lived in North Korea, or if you lived in Africa and your currency collapsed and you watched your family get wiped out, then maybe you get it. But, that wasn't the mainstream, right? The Western world is not run by people that lost their family's life savings in Africa or South America. So it was an interesting idea, but it was a fringe idea until 2020. And in 2020, the monetary inflation rate tripled in the US. And what we saw was, in the world's best economies, you're losing 15 to 20% of your economic value in the currency every year. In the second tier economies, you're losing 30% or more. Like the Japanese yen is down 24% against the dollar in the last 12 months. I did have a business in Argentina, and I watched a currency collapse in Argentina where we lost nearly everything. Like we lost all of our profits for a decade. And overnight, we had all our money in a bank, and it was in dollars. It was an American bank in Argentina.
Really?
And the American bank sealed itself. The government sent an edict to the bank. The bank converted our dollars into pesos at $1 per peso. And then the next day devalued the peso 10 for 1. And we lost 90% of our money in one day. So we decided that rather than the slow or the fast death, we would go and do something and take a risk. And it's a very intricate story, which is probably beyond the scope of this. But the short of it is about 10 different transactions, a share buyback, a Dutch auction, equity raises, junk bond, convertible bonds, lots of communication to the street. And we went from investing $250 million in Bitcoin to $425 million in Bitcoin to eventually $1 billion in Bitcoin to $2 billion in Bitcoin to just slightly less than $4 billion in Bitcoin. And the result, I just said, right, for our shareholders, our stock outperformed every big tech company, every asset class, and every enterprise software company. I think we did the number and we calculated we outperformed 485 of the 500 S&P companies over that time period. And then in terms of the corporation itself, we added billions and billions of dollars to the enterprise value of the company. So it's paid off so far, even though we get thrashed this way and that way by volatility. We still get the same, question, which is, if I have an increment of $10 million of cash flow, do I put it into bonds? Do I put it into gold? Do I buy silver? Do I buy land? Do I buy art? Do I buy Bitcoin? So I still think Bitcoin is the most scarce, most desirable, highest quality property as a long-term store of value.